Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we are stepping into life in the 19th century, a time when the world began to change faster than ever before. It was a time of smoke and invention, of crowded streets and expanding horizons, of ideas that unsettled old traditions and reshaped how people lived and worked. Ordinary days were filled with unfamiliar sounds, new routines, and growing connections to places far beyond the local neighborhood. Long-standing rhythms of life were challenged, sometimes abruptly, by machines, schedules, and systems that promised progress while demanding adaptation. This was a century when voices could travel across wires, images could preserve a moment forever, and distant events could suddenly feel close and urgent. It was also a time of deep contrasts, where optimism and hardship existed side by side, and where modern life began to take a recognizable shape. Exploring this era invites us to notice how many parts of our present world first emerged during these remarkable years. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. For now, there is nothing you need to do but settle in. Let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow, and allow your thoughts to drift as we step back into this fascinating century together. Let's begin. The 8-hour day became a rallying cry, not an ordinary expectation. For many 19th century workers, a day could mean sunrise to nightfall, then more when demand rose. The 8-hour movement argued for a different arithmetic. 8 hours for work, 8 for rest, and 8 for living. It was a bold claim because it treated leisure as a human need, not a reward. Campaigns spread through meetings, banners, and strikes, and the slogan became portable enough to chant in any city street. Employers often warned that shorter hours would collapse profits, while workers described injuries, exhaustion, and children who barely saw a parent awake. The fight was rarely tidy. Some victories were local, some were reversed, and some were won only after violence and arrests. Even so, the idea kept returning, like a tide. It helped redefine time itself as something that could be negotiated, not only demanded. Home life shifted as mass-produced goods replaced many handmade essentials. A household once depended on constant making. Clothes were mended and remade, candles and soap might be produced at home, and tools were repaired until they could not be saved. As factories expanded, everyday objects began arriving ready to use. Stoves, matches, tins, and packaged goods altered the rhythm of domestic work, and they changed what skills were necessary for survival. Some tasks grew easier and faster, while new chores appeared, like shopping, comparing brands, and managing cash for purchases that used to be made with time. Decorative items also became more available, which encouraged new ideas about comfort, taste, and what a respectable home should look like. This shift touched relationships as well. When less time was spent producing essentials, more time could go to childcare, paid work, or leisure, depending on the household's means. Mass production moved the center of many homes away from making and toward choosing. Florence Nightingale used statistics to reform military hospitals and sanitation. She arrived to find crowded wards, filthy linens, and a supply system that failed when lives depended on it. Instead of relying only on moral appeal, she gathered data that revealed patterns in suffering, and she turned those patterns into clear visual arguments. Her charts made it harder for officials to dismiss the scale of preventable deaths, because the numbers spoke with a cold clarity that outrage alone could not match. Practical reforms followed, including improved ventilation, better food, cleaner bedding, and more reliable laundry and waste handling. She also helped reshape nursing into disciplined work with training and standards, rather than informal caretaking. Her legacy is not only compassion, although it certainly included that. It is the idea that caring for others can be redesigned, and that evidence can force institutions to change when tradition and pride would otherwise keep them still. Cholera outbreaks pushed cities to build sewers and protect drinking water. The disease inspired terror because it could strike quickly, draining strength until the body collapsed. In the early waves, many authorities focused on smell and visible filth, because the true route of transmission was not yet widely accepted. Careful observation and mapping began to connect outbreaks with contaminated water sources, and that insight moved reform from guesswork to engineering. Cities faced an unglamorous challenge. They had to tear up streets, raise funds, and build systems that would be buried and mostly unseen. Yet those hidden pipes and tunnels reshaped survival, because safer water reduced not only cholera, but also many other stomach illnesses that quietly killed children. The crisis also changed politics, since citizens demanded action and officials had to answer. Cholera forced a new idea into public life. Health was not only personal behavior. It was infrastructure, maintenance, and collective responsibility. London's Great Stink made sewage engineering a political emergency. A hot summer intensified the foul odour rising from the River Thames, which had become a dumping ground for waste from a swelling population. The stench was so overwhelming near Parliament that daily work was disrupted, and the city's leaders could no longer postpone the problem without embarrassment. Public disgust became a lever, because it transformed sanitation from a slow reform into an urgent demand. Engineers proposed bold plans to intercept sewage before it reached the river's central stretches, and those plans required unprecedented coordination. Massive embankments, pumping stations, and new sewers began redirecting waste away from the heart of the city. The transformation did not create instant purity, yet it marked a turning point in what London expected from itself. A capital that imagined global power had to prove it could manage its own basics. In this case, progress began when denial became impossible to maintain. Darwin's natural selection challenged old certainties about life's origins. When Charles Darwin argued that species change through natural selection, he offered a story of life shaped by small advantages accumulating over immense time. The idea was both simple and explosive. It suggested that complexity could emerge without a guiding hand arranging each detail, and it placed humans within the same natural processes as every other creature. The debate quickly spilled out of science into sermons, newspapers, and dinner tables. Some readers felt liberated by a framework that made nature intelligible. Others felt unsettled, because familiar boundaries between humans and animals seemed to blur. The theory also energized new fields. Biologists began asking how traits are inherited, how populations change, and why islands and fossils tell such strange stories. Even those who rejected Darwin could not ignore him, because he changed the questions that educated society asked about itself. The 19th century gained a new kind of origin story, written in struggle and survival. Mendel's pea experiments quietly founded genetics before anyone noticed. In a monastery garden, Gregor Mendel bred pea plants with careful patience, tracking traits like flower color and seed shape across generations. He counted outcomes, compared ratios, and treated inheritance as something that could be measured rather than guessed. The patterns he described suggested that traits travel in discrete units, even when they seem to disappear and reappear. Today, that idea feels foundational, yet in the 19th century his work landed softly. It was published, it was read by a few, and then it faded into obscurity for decades, partly because biology had not yet built the language to hold it. That quiet reception is part of the wonder. A major key to heredity was hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment in scientific culture. Mendel's legacy also captures a tender truth about discovery. Sometimes the world is not ready for an answer, even when the answer is correct. Vaccination debates grew louder as governments pushed wider smallpox protection. Smallpox was feared for its deadly speed and the scars it left behind, so prevention carried enormous hope. As vaccination spread, authorities began encouraging and sometimes requiring it, especially in crowded towns where outbreaks could race through households. That push sparked fierce arguments about liberty, trust, and risk. Some communities welcomed mandates as protection for the vulnerable, while others resisted on principle or from fear of side effects and abuse of power. Protest meetings, pamphlets, and cartoons turned medical policy into public spectacle, and the dispute became a lesson in how health and politics can collide. Doctors and reformers argued that collective safety required coordinated action, while opponents warned that coercion could erode public confidence. The 19th century did not settle these tensions. It made them visible, and it showed that prevention is never only a scientific matter. It also depends on legitimacy, communication, and social consent. Ether and chloroform made surgery survivable for patients and surgeons. Before anesthesia, the operating room was defined by speed, restraint, and dread, because pain set the tempo for every decision. When ether and chloroform arrived, they changed the emotional climate of medicine, since patients could undergo procedures without conscious agony. Surgeons gained time, which allowed more careful work and expanded what could be attempted, from delicate repairs to longer operations that would once have been unthinkable. Yet the new drugs carried danger of their own, because early dosing could be uncertain and monitoring was still primitive. That risk forced new teamwork, with someone watching breathing and pulse while the surgeon focused on the task. Anesthesia also changed public perception, since the promise of painlessness made hospitals feel less like places of last resort. It was a rare moment when a medical innovation altered not only technique, but also fear itself and the social meaning of surgery. Antiseptic practice reduced infections and transformed the reputation of hospitals. Hospitals had long been feared as places where a small wound could turn deadly, because hospital diseases spread through dirty hands, reused dressings, and unwashed instruments. In the later 19th century, surgeons like Joseph Lister began treating infection as something that could be prevented, not merely endured. Carbolic acid entered the operating room, first as a harsh spray, and then as part of a broader discipline of cleaning and barrier methods. Results spoke loudly. Amputations and fractures that once carried a high risk of fatal sepsis became far more survivable in skilled hands. This did more than save lives. It changed behavior. Patients became more willing to enter hospitals, and medical training shifted toward controlled environments where procedures could be repeated and improved. The hospital began evolving from a last resort into a workshop for healing. The stethoscope turned listening into diagnosis, changing bedside medicine. Before this tool, a doctor often relied on what could be seen, what could be felt, and what a patient described. In the early 19th century, René Laennec rolled paper into a tube to listen to the chest without pressing an ear against the body, and a new era of clinical listening began. The instrument sharpened attention. Subtle differences in breath sounds, heartbeats, and rattles became clues that could point toward pneumonia, heart valve problems, or fluid in the lungs. It also changed medical culture. Students were taught to train their ears like musicians, comparing what they heard to patterns described in textbooks. The bedside visit became more investigative and less purely conversational. For some patients, the device felt mysterious, even theatrical. Yet it offered something precious. Evidence gathered in real time from inside the body without cutting it open. A hypodermic syringe made precise dosing possible, for better and worse. When medicine is swallowed, much of it is lost or delayed, and the body's response can be unpredictable. The hypodermic syringe, refined in the mid-19th century, offered a startling alternative. A measured dose could be delivered directly into tissue, acting faster and with greater consistency. That precision mattered in emergencies, and it transformed pain treatment, especially when morphine became widely available. It also reshaped medical authority. A doctor could now administer a powerful drug in a way that felt immediate, decisive, and modern. Yet the same speed and strength carried danger. Dependence could develop quietly, and respectable addiction sometimes began in a clinic rather than a back alley. The syringe made medicine more exact, and it made its consequences more exact as well. It is a small invention with an enormous shadow. Dental anesthesia began changing fear, pain, and public trust in dentistry. For many people, dentistry had been a last-minute surrender to agony, followed by extraction as the simplest solution. In the 19th century, dentists began adopting anesthetics that could blunt or remove pain, and that shift changed everything about the chair. Nitrous oxide became famous as laughing gas, and early public demonstrations showed crowds that pain could be interrupted, not simply survived. Ether and later local numbing methods helped dentists attempt more careful work, because a patient who was not thrashing or pleading could be treated with patience and precision. This improved the reputation of dentistry from a trade associated with dread to a profession linked to science and skill. It also changed habits. People became more willing to seek care earlier, before the problem became unbearable. Pain had kept mouths silent. Anesthesia gave people the courage to speak up and to return. Mental asylums expanded, mixing compassion, confinement, and controversial treatments. The 19th century saw a surge of institutions built for people labeled insane, often driven by reformers who wanted to replace neglect and punishment with care. The idea of moral treatment promised calm routines, meaningful work, and environments meant to soothe distress. For a time, some places did offer refuge from prisons and poorhouses. Then numbers swelled. Overcrowding strained ideals, and many asylums became custodial warehouses where control mattered more than recovery. Treatments varied widely, and some were well-intentioned but misguided, including harsh restraints, isolation, and exhausting regimens. The asylum also became a social mirror. Women could be institutionalized for behavior seen as improper, and the poor often had fewer protections than the wealthy. This expansion revealed a difficult truth. Society wanted a humane solution, yet it also wanted to hide suffering from view. The buildings grew larger, and the moral questions grew heavier. The periodic table organized elements, making chemistry suddenly predictive. Chemistry once felt like an endless cabinet of substances with no clear map, and each new discovery threatened to add chaos. In the late 19th century, Dmitri Mendeleev arranged elements by repeating patterns in their properties, and the arrangement did something magical. It left gaps. Those empty spaces were not mistakes. They were predictions of elements not yet found, complete with expected traits. When discoveries later matched those forecasts, the table gained authority that felt almost uncanny. This new order mattered beyond laboratories. Industries that depended on metals, dyes, fertilizers, and explosives now had a clearer guide to how matter could behave and combine. Students could learn relationships instead of memorizing isolated facts. The table also changed how people imagined nature. It suggested that the material world had an underlying structure and that human reasoning could uncover it. Order emerged from variety, and curiosity had a blueprint. The 19th century turned steam power into everyday muscle for nations. It began in coal smoke and iron, with engines that did not tire or ask for sleep. Steam pumps drained mines deeper than before, so more coal could be pulled up to feed even more engines. Mills no longer depended on a fast river, so factories gathered where workers could be found, and whole towns rearranged themselves around the hiss and thump of grouse. Machinery. Steam-powered presses pushed out books and posters at a pace that startled older generations. Steam hammers shaped metal with force that once required teams of skilled hands. Even farms felt the change, as early steam traction engines and threshing machines hinted that muscle and horsepower would no longer set the ceiling on work. For many people, modern life first sounded like a rhythmic piston. New geology argued for deep time, stretching Earth's age beyond imagination. Earlier generations often pictured Earth's history as short, with beginnings close enough to fit inside familiar chronologies. 19th-century geologists began reading cliffs and quarries like archives, and the pages were thick. Layered strata suggested long periods of deposition, erosion, and upheaval. Fossils appeared in sequences that implied change over time, and slow processes like river cutting could be measured in landscapes that took ages to form. Thinkers such as Charles Lyell argued that everyday forces, given enough time, could shape mountains and seas. This expanded time frame was not just academic. It changed how people understood themselves, because human history became a thin layer atop a vast natural past. Deep time also gave theories like evolution room to operate, since gradual change needed a long stage. The 19th century did not simply add years to Earth. It rewired imagination, turning the planet into something ancient, dynamic, and profoundly patient. The second law of thermodynamics reshaped how people understood energy and heat. Steam engines powered the century, yet engineers kept confronting a stubborn limit. No matter how clever the design, some energy always slipped away as waste heat. Scientists, including Rudolf Clausius and William Thomson, later known as Lord Kelvin, helped formalize this reality into a principle that changed more than machinery. The second law introduced the concept of entropy, a measure tied to how energy spreads out and becomes less available for useful work. This was not merely a technical insight. It carried a kind of philosophical weight. It suggested direction in nature, a one-way drift from concentrated order toward dispersion, at least in closed systems. That idea seeped into broader culture, influencing how people talked about progress, decay, and the costs of industry. It also sharpened engineering, because understanding limits can guide better choices. The 19th century learned that power has boundaries, and that those boundaries are written into the physics of the universe. The telephone carried voices over wires, shrinking distance in a new way. Suddenly, conversation no longer required shared air. Early calls were often faint and crackly, yet the shock was unmistakable. You could hear a living voice from somewhere you could not see. That novelty reshaped business first, since deals and instructions could be settled in minutes instead of by messenger. It reshaped emergencies too, because help could be summoned without running through streets. The telephone also changed social life in a quieter way. It made distance feel less absolute, and it began teaching people new manners about interruption, privacy, and who was allowed to speak first. Operators and switchboards turned cities into living networks, with human hands connecting calls like stitches. Even when the technology was awkward, it carried something older than industry: tone, hesitation, laughter, and relief. A wire became a bridge for emotion. The phonograph captured sound, letting music outlive the moment it was made. Before recording, music vanished as soon as the last note faded. If you wanted to hear a song again, someone had to perform it again. The phonograph overturned that rule by storing vibrations as physical traces that could be replayed. The first demonstrations amazed audiences because a machine seemed to remember. People began imagining voices preserved after death, speeches repeated without a speaker, and lessons delivered without a teacher in the room. This new permanence also changed performers. A singer could be heard far from the city where they lived, and a style could spread without travel. The technology was imperfect, yet even its scratches and hiss felt like proof that time had been trapped in a groove. Sound became an object you could own, gift, and collect. The 19th century gave the world a new kind of memory. Electric lighting began replacing gas lamps, changing nights in major cities. A brighter night changed what felt possible. Electric lights did not flicker like flame, and they reduced the constant routine of lighting, trimming, and refilling. Streets could be illuminated with a steadier glow, which altered the sense of safety for late workers and pedestrians. Shops could keep windows bright, and factories could extend production with fewer shadows and fewer open flames. The change arrived unevenly, and early electrical systems had their own dangers and failures. Even so, the direction was clear. Darkness was no longer a firm boundary that ended the day. Public life began stretching later, and the rhythm of sleep and leisure shifted with it. Electric light also became a symbol, used to advertise modernity itself. A street lit by electricity did not just look different. It declared that the future had arrived. Gaslight nightlife expanded and created new concerns about fire and fumes. When gaslight spread, evenings gained a new social energy. Theaters, cafes, and meeting halls could stay open later, and streets became navigable after sunset in ways that felt revolutionary. City dwellers found new habits, like strolling after dinner and gathering under bright windows. Yet gaslight carried a price. Leaks could poison indoor air, and poorly ventilated rooms could leave people dizzy or ill. Explosions and fires were real fears, especially in crowded districts where one accident could race through buildings. Maintaining pipes, valves, and lamps became a public responsibility, and arguments flared over who should pay for safety. Gaslight also revealed something about progress. A technology can expand freedom while introducing new risks that no earlier generation had to imagine. Night became more inviting and more complicated at the same time. The typewriter sped business writing and opened office work to many women. Handwriting had limits, since it depended on legibility, patience, and the endurance of the writer. The typewriter offered uniform letters at a faster pace, and it made copies and records easier to manage. Offices that once revolved around ledgers and penmanship began to reorganize around keyboards, dictation, and filing systems. This shift created a new class of jobs, encoding typists and stenographers, and many of those roles were filled by women seeking paid work outside domestic gray, service or factories. That change brought opportunity, and it also brought new expectations about appearance, conduct, and wages in white-collar spaces. The machine itself shaped behavior. It encouraged concise phrasing, standardized forms, and a brisker tempo of communication. In a small way, it trained society to think in documents and processes. A clicking keyboard helped build the modern office, one line at a time. The sewing machine transformed clothing and shifted fashion toward mass production. Clothing had once been slow work, measured in hours of hand stitching that kept families busy and made garments precious. With sewing machines, seams could be produced at a speed that shocked experienced needleworkers. Workshops and factories scaled up, ready-made garments became more common, and fashion began moving faster through cities. This did not only change what people wore, it changed who worked, since many women found employment in garment trades, often under exhausting conditions. It also changed social signals. When decent clothing became cheaper, appearance no longer mapped as neatly onto wealth, which unsettled old assumptions about class. At home, the machine became a prized tool for mending and making, and it altered the economics of household labor. A single invention tightened stitches and loosened old boundaries. It helped turn clothing into an industry, not just a craft. Canned food supported armies and cities, changing diets and supply chains. Feeding large populations had always depended on season and distance, and spoilage punished every long journey. Canning offered a bold solution. Food sealed and heated could travel farther and last longer, which made it valuable for navies, expeditions, and armies that could not forage reliably. It also served growing cities, where fresh supply could not always match demand. Early cans were heavy, and opening them could be a struggle without proper tools. Yet the benefit was undeniable. Meals could be planned, stockpiled, and shipped with fewer losses. This reshaped diets too, since people encountered new foods preserved from far away, sometimes for the first time. Canning also encouraged new industries, from tin plate production to large-scale processing plants. It was not only about convenience. It was about control over time, distance, and hunger. Refrigeration slowly changed markets, making fresh food less seasonal. Cold became a technology, not just a winter gift. At first, ice harvesting and insulated storage extended cold temperatures into warmer months. Later, mechanical refrigeration began widening that power, allowing meat, dairy, and produce to survive transport with fewer losses. This transformed markets. A city could eat food raised far beyond its outskirts, and merchants could plan inventories with more confidence. It also reshaped expectations. When freshness becomes available more often, people start treating it as normal, and that changes taste and demand. Refrigeration influenced health as well, since safer storage reduced some foodborne risks, even while new systems introduced their own hazards and learning curves. The shift was gradual, yet profound. It pulled diets away from strict seasonality and made the food economy more connected, more commercial, and more dependent on infrastructure. A colder world fed a larger one. Time zones were standardized because trains made local time impractical. For most of history, noon was local, set by the sun overhead. Two towns could disagree by minutes, and nobody cared much. Railways made those minutes matter. When trains ran on published schedules, a patchwork of local times created confusion, missed connections, and dangerous misunderstandings. Standard Time solved that by asking whole regions to agree on a single clock, even if the sun did not perfectly match it everywhere. This required persuasion, because it felt strange to surrender a natural measure for a human system. Yet the benefits were immediate. Timetables became readable, coordination became easier, and commerce moved with fewer friction points. Time zones also changed how people imagined the world. The planet became something that could be divided and managed by invisible lines. Clocks became a shared language, and punctuality gained a new authority. Steel-making breakthroughs allowed taller bridges, stronger rails, and bigger ships. Steel was not just stronger metal. It was a new confidence in what could be built. Improved processes made steel cheaper and more available, which mattered because iron could crack under heavy loads, and wood could not compete with modern strain. Railways benefited first, since stronger rails and components reduced failures and enabled heavier trains. Bridges reached farther spans and carried more weight, which opened routes that had once seemed impossible. Shipbuilders also gained freedom, since steel hulls could be larger and more durable, supporting long voyages and immense cargo. This shift changed skylines too. As steel frames developed, Buildings could climb higher without relying on thick masonry walls at the base. Everyday people might not talk about metallurgy, yet they lived inside its consequences. Commutes, shipping prices, and city streets were shaped by this harder backbone. Steel-making progress did not only improve objects, it expanded the scale of imagination, and it made ambitious engineering feel normal. The Crimean War popularized war reporting and shocked readers with detail. For many civilians, war had been filtered through official announcements and patriotic distance. During this conflict, correspondents sent vivid dispatches that described harsh weather, inadequate supplies, and appalling hospital conditions, and readers consumed those accounts with a new sense of immediacy. The public learned that administrative failure could kill as surely as enemy fire, which changed how citizens judged leaders. Reports stirred outrage, and outrage pressured governments to respond, since reputations were now exposed to daily scrutiny. Photography also helped shape perception, even when images were limited by long exposures and staged settings. The key shift was cultural. War became something that could be investigated by outsiders, argued over in print, and discussed at breakfast tables far from the front. The Crimean War helped create the expectation that the public had a right to know what was happening in its name. Postal reforms made letters cheap and created a boom in everyday correspondence. When sending a letter is expensive, messages become rare and formal. Reforms in the 19th century lowered costs, simplified payment, and made mail reliable enough to shape daily life. Suddenly, ordinary people could write more often, not just the wealthy or the well-connected. Families separated by work or migration could stay emotionally close through paper, and friendships could deepen across distance. Businesses benefited too, since orders, invoices, and confirmations could flow steadily without special couriers. The Postal Service also encouraged new habits. People began saving letters, expecting replies, and treating written communication as part of routine life. It supported new kinds of communities, since clubs, campaigns, and interest groups could coordinate through the mail. Cheap postage did something quietly powerful. It expanded who could participate in a wider conversation, and it made the world feel more reachable from a kitchen table. The penny press made news affordable and intensified competition for attention. Cheap newspapers changed what it meant to be informed. When a paper cost only a penny, it could reach factory workers, apprentices, and street sellers, not only subscribers with spare money. Publishers fought for readers every morning, so they chased speed, drama, and stories that sparked conversation. Crime reports, disasters, and courtroom twists moved to the front page because a shocking headline could sell an issue in minutes. Reporters were pushed to gather details quickly, and that urgency helped create modern habits of interviewing and on-the-ground observation. This new media world could educate, but it could also inflame, since exaggeration and rumor were profitable temptations. The penny press helped build a public that expected constant updates, and it trained cities to wake up hungry for the latest story. Advertising became a new language, shaping what people wanted to buy. As mass production grew, sellers faced a new problem. They could make more goods than ever before, so they needed strangers to desire them. Advertising stepped in as persuasion with a rhythm and a style. Posters, handbills, and newspaper notices began promising beauty, status, health, and modern life itself. Brand names mattered more, since shoppers could no longer personally know the maker of every product. Catchy slogans and distinctive logos turned ordinary soap, biscuits, or tonics into something memorable. Advertising also learned to borrow authority, using endorsements, medals, and impressive-sounding claims that did not always deserve trust. This was not only commerce, it was culture. It taught people to imagine improved versions of themselves, and it taught them to connect that dream to a purchase. The 19th century did not invent wanting. It industrialized it and gave it a voice. Department stores turned shopping into an experience, not just an errand. Walking into a department store could feel like entering a small city under one roof. Instead of a single counter, there were departments, displays, and aisles that invited wandering. Fixed prices reduced haggling, which made shopping feel more predictable and, for many, more comfortable. Large windows tempted passers-by, and seasonal decorations made the street itself part of the spectacle. Some stores added to rooms, reading rooms, and rest areas, which encouraged longer visits and brought more women into public commercial space. Returns and exchanges became policies, which quietly shifted power toward the customer. Behind the scenes, these stores relied on vast stock rooms, careful bookkeeping, and armies of clerks. They helped train people to browse, compare, and treat consumption as leisure. Shopping became a ritual with lights, crowds, and desire, carefully staged. Railways shrank continents, letting people travel in days, not weeks. Imagine planning a journey that once demanded spare shoes, letters of introduction, and a tolerance for mud. Then consider a timetable that promised arrival to the hour. Rail travel did more than speed people up. It changed where cities grew, since stations became magnets for hotels, markets, and new neighborhoods. It changed food, since fresh fish and milk could reach inland buyers before spoiling. It changed romance and family life, since visits that were once rare could happen more often. It even changed danger, as crowds learned new rules about platforms, signals, and collisions at high speed. For many riders, the first long rail trip felt like crossing a private threshold into the future. The landscape still rolled by, but the world suddenly felt closer. The telegraph made near-instant messages possible across oceans and empires. Before wires, news moved at the speed of a horse, a ship, or a rumor. Telegraphy turned language into pulses, so a skilled operator could send meaning through dots and dashes faster than any messenger. Businesses used it to learn prices and place orders before competitors even heard the market had shifted. Governments used it to coordinate decisions across far-flung territories, with fewer weeks of uncertainty in between. Families used it for the sharpest moments, when a few words mattered more than a long letter. Undersea cables were especially dramatic, since they carried signals through darkness and pressure that felt almost mythical. A storm at sea could still delay a voyage, yet information could arrive first. It was a new kind of presence, made of electricity. Cities exploded in size, and overcrowding forced new ideas about public health. When work concentrated in factories, people followed, and housing often lagged behind. Families squeezed into single rooms, and cellars became homes that never saw full daylight. Water sources were shared, and waste was too often stored close to where children played. In that pressure cooker, sickness could move quickly, and fear moved with it. Reformers began to ask practical questions that sounded radical at the time. Where does drinking water come from? Where does it go after use? Who is responsible when a neighborhood becomes unlivable? Inspectors, surveys, and early health boards appeared, and the city became something that could be engineered, not just endured. Overcrowding was harsh, yet it also pushed the idea that health was not only personal. It was shaped by streets, pipes, and policies. Photographs began freezing real faces, making history suddenly look familiar. Paintings could flatter, symbols could idealize, and memory could drift. A photograph offered something sharper. It caught the exact tilt of the head, the crease at the corner of an eye, and the stubborn reality of a warm coat. Early processes were slow, so sitters learned to hold still, and studios used braces and careful lighting to tame movement. Families who could afford it treated portraits like treasure, since they could outlast travel, illness, and distance. Photographs also changed public life. They documented streets, bridges, and disasters, and they gave famous figures a recognizable face that could be printed and shared. By the end of the century, images could travel widely, and the past gained a new intimacy. It stopped being only names. It became people you could look at. Germ theory rewrote medicine and changed how people feared disease. For a long time, sickness was blamed on bad air, imbalanced humors, or vague corruption in the environment. Then microscopes and careful experiments helped reveal an unsettling idea. Tiny living agents could invade the body and multiply. This reframed disease as a battle with an enemy that followed rules, not a curse that struck at random. Doctors began to value cleanliness with a new seriousness, and hospitals slowly changed from places people avoided into places that might help. Even everyday habits shifted. Boiling, washing, and separating the sick from the well gained a scientific urgency. The idea also transformed blame. If illness had a cause, then prevention became possible, and failure to prevent began to look like negligence. It was hopeful and frightening at the same time. The world felt newly alive and newly crowded. Mass newspapers created shared headlines and shaped public opinion at scale. In earlier eras, many people learned news through local talk or slow pamphlets. Cheaper printing and rising literacy helped newspapers become a daily habit. Editors chose which events mattered, which voices sounded trustworthy, and which fears deserved attention. Wars, trials, and scandals could spread beyond a single town, turning private trouble into public drama. Serialized stories kept readers returning, and political cartoons taught opinions through images. Newspapers also created a new kind of time, where yesterday's issue felt stale and today's edition felt urgent. This constant stream could unite a nation around a common story, yet it could also inflame divisions when papers competed for loyalty. Readers began to argue from what they had read, not only from what they had seen. Information became a force that could move crowds, ballots, and reputations. Industrial pollution darkened skies and sparked early battles over urban air. Coal powered the machines, but it also filled streets with soot that settled on windowsills and lungs. Laundry could come in dirtier than it went out. Buildings blackened, and daylight sometimes looked filtered, even at midday. People argued about what this smoke meant. Some called it the smell of prosperity. Others called it a public nuisance that ruined health and dignity. Complaints led to early smoke abatement campaigns, with inspectors, local ordinances, and heated debates about enforcement. Factory owners often resisted, since cleaner fuel and better furnaces cost money. Working families had complex feelings too, because the same chimneys that fouled the air also provided wages. These conflicts created a familiar question for modern life. Who gets to breathe clean air, and who pays for it? The 19th century made that question unavoidable. New machines multiplied production so fast that whole jobs vanished overnight. Mechanization could feel like magic, since a device could do in minutes what once took hours of trained hands. In textile towns, new looms and spinning frames threatened craftspeople who had built identities around skill. Some workers adapted and became machine tenders, while others saw their wages drop as tasks were simplified. The anxiety was not only economic, it was personal, because pride in workmanship was tied to community respect. Resistance took many forms, including petitions, strikes, and occasional acts of sabotage that terrified employers and attracted harsh punishment. At the same time, cheaper goods reached people who had never been able to afford them before, which complicated the moral story. Progress arrived with winners and losers in the same street. The 19th century taught a lasting lesson. Technology changes what is possible, and it also changes who is needed. The cotton gin accelerated cotton profits and intensified slavery's brutal expansion. By rapidly separating seeds from short staple cotton, the machine changed what could be grown profitably and where. Planters who once relied on slower processing suddenly saw a crop that could scale. So acreage spread across the American South with ruthless speed. That expansion demanded grueling field labor, and it drove the domestic slave trade that tore families apart through forced sale and relocation. Cotton wealth also tightened links between plantations, shipping ports, northern financiers, and British textile mills, creating a transatlantic chain where profit often felt distant from suffering. The invention did not introduce cruelty, yet it amplified an existing system by making its core product more lucrative. It is one of history's harsh reminders that a tool can increase productivity while also deepening injustice when power decides who pays the human cost. Abolition movements spread across borders, turning moral debate into mass politics. What began as personal conviction grew into coordinated action that crossed oceans by letter, lecture, and printed appeal. Activists organized petitions so large that lawmakers could not easily ignore them, and they used public meetings to turn private outrage into collective camera pressure. Formerly enslaved speakers and writers carried extraordinary authority because their testimony made abstraction impossible. Campaigns also targeted everyday consumption, urging people to refuse goods tied to bondage, which pulled ethics into the marketplace. In Britain, emancipation in the empire became a global reference point, celebrated by some and criticized by others for what it failed to repair. In the United States, the movement intensified political conflict as anti-slavery voices challenged laws, parties, and social norms. Abolition became more than an idea. It became an organized force that taught later reformers how to mobilize crowds, arguments, and conscience. The American Civil War tested industry, logistics, and modern weaponry together. The conflict demanded more than bravery because scale made paperwork, supply, and transport decisive. Armies needed mountains of food, uniforms, ammunition, and medical supplies. So rail depots and warehouses became targets as valuable as forts. Rifled muskets and improved artillery extended lethal range, which made traditional mass charges disastrously costly. Telegraph lines helped commanders coordinate faster, yet speed also meant mistakes could spread quickly through entire campaigns. Battlefields produced casualties in numbers that strained hospitals and forced new systems for triage, transport, and record-keeping. War also became a contest of manufacturing capacity, since factories and foundries determined how long forces could stay equipped. When it ended, the nation carried scars in bodies and memory, and it left behind lessons about how technology and organization can magnify both power and suffering. Ironclad warships proved wood fleets could become obsolete in a single decade. For centuries, naval strength depended on timber hulls and thick planking that could withstand cannon fire. Armor plating overturned that assumption because iron could absorb impacts that would have shattered wood into lethal splinters. When ironclads faced each other in the American Civil War, the world's navies took notice, since the encounter hinted that entire fleets might be outdated at once. Ship design quickly shifted toward steam propulsion, rotating turrets, and heavier guns built to penetrate metal. This change tied sea power even more tightly to industry on land because iron, coal, and machine tools became as important as seamanship. Admirals had to rethink tactics, since speed, armor, and firepower interacted in unfamiliar ways. It was a dramatic moment when the ocean, long ruled by sail and oak, began to look like a proving ground for industrial engineering. Ready-made clothing expanded and blurred class signals in public. When garments were mostly tailored or handmade at home, clothing revealed time, money, and access to skill. Ready-made clothing disrupted that map. Standard sizes and factory cutting meant coats, shirts, and dresses could be bought quickly and at prices more people could reach. A working person could dress more neatly for church or a job interview, and a clerk could imitate styles once limited to the wealthy. This did not erase inequality, yet it made social boundaries less obvious at a glance, which unsettled those who relied on appearance to sort strangers. It also changed labor, since large-scale garment production demanded cutters, stitchers, and finishers, often in exhausting conditions. The rise of ready-made clothing created a new world of fashion cycles and storefront temptation. Clothing became faster, more accessible, and more confusing as a social signal. Photography studios offered portraits, letting ordinary families own an image history. A studio portrait was not casual. It was an event that families planned for, saved for, and sometimes traveled for. Inside, backdrops suggested elegance or adventure, and props signaled education, taste, or profession. The sitter had to hold still, which gave early portraits their serious expressions, yet the result felt astonishingly personal. For the first time, an ordinary household could keep a true likeness of a parent, a child, or a grandparent. These images became heirlooms, carried through moves and hardships, and sometimes sent across oceans to relatives who might never meet in person again. Studios also created new work for photographers, retouchers, and printers, and they helped standardize how people presented themselves to the world. A portrait was proof of presence. It turned family memory into an object that could survive time, distance, and loss. Illustrated magazines made distant events visible for readers at home. Words can describe a battlefield or a coronation, yet an image can make it feel immediate. Illustrated magazines brought sketches, engravings, and later photographic reproductions into middle-class living rooms. Readers could see the outline of a new bridge, the uniform of a foreign army, or the crowded streets of a faraway city. This visual access changed empathy and curiosity, because distant people became more real when you could study their faces and clothing. It also changed politics, since images could stir outrage or pride faster than long essays. Editors learned that a dramatic picture could sell an issue, so artists were sent to capture disasters, ceremonies, and scandals. These magazines helped create a shared visual world long before film and television. They taught the public to expect proof, to look closely, and to argue about what an image meant, not only what it showed. Public libraries grew, linking literacy with civic pride and reform. A public library was more than a room of books. It was a promise that knowledge should not belong only to the wealthy. As libraries spread, they offered working people a place to learn after long shifts, and they offered children a path beyond the limits of their neighborhood. Libraries also carried moral ambition. Reformers believed reading could reduce crime, temper vice, and build better citizens. Rules were strict in many places, yet the doors still opened to readers who had never owned a book. Catalogues and classification systems turned shelves into searchable worlds, and librarians became guides to information. The library was also a social space that was neither church nor tavern, and that mattered in crowded cities. In the 19th century, a library card could feel like a quiet form of power. It granted access to ideas, and it suggested that self-improvement was a public good. Compulsory schooling expanded, reshaping childhood for millions of families. When schooling became compulsory, childhood began to change shape. For many families, children had always contributed labor, whether in fields, workshops, or factories. Laws that required attendance pulled more young people into classrooms, and that shift created new routines of bells, desks, and homework. It also created conflict, because lost wages could be devastating for poor households. Supporters argued that education built opportunity and social stability, while opponents feared state intrusion and cultural erasure. As schools expanded, they spread standardized lessons, national histories, and shared language, which helped build modern national identity. They also introduced new forms of discipline, grading, and testing that could define a child's future. The classroom became a training ground for punctuality, obedience, and literacy, all at once. Compulsory education did not simply add knowledge. It reorganized family life, work expectations, and what society thought a child should be. Child labor powered factories and fueled fierce political fights over reform. In many industrial towns, children worked because families needed every coin, and employers valued small hands that could tend machines or crawl into tight tower. Spaces, long hours, dangerous equipment, and relentless noise shaped bodies that were still growing. Reformers collected testimonies and published reports that described injuries, exhaustion, and lost schooling, and those accounts sparked public anger. Factory owners argued that regulation would harm business, and some parents feared that reforms would remove income without replacing it. The debates became a test of what society owed its youngest members and of whether profit could justify visible harm. Over time, age limits and hour restrictions spread, though enforcement was uneven and resistance remained strong. The struggle helped create the modern idea that childhood should include protection, education, and play, not only work. The 19th century made the argument unavoidable, and it showed that compassion often has to fight economics to be heard. Labor unions organized strikes, demanding shorter hours and safer workplaces. As factories grew, individual workers often had little leverage against owners who could hire replacements. Unions offered a different kind of power, built from solidarity and shared risk. Workers paid dues, held meetings, and debated strategies that could cost them their jobs and sometimes their freedom. A strike could shut down production, yet it could also invite violence, blacklists, and hunger. Unions fought for practical changes like safer machinery guards, limits on child labor, and the idea that a workday should have an end. They also fought for dignity, since conditions often treated people as disposable. Newspapers and politicians took sides, and clashes between labor and management became defining dramas of industrial society. Even when strikes failed, they taught lessons about negotiation, publicity, and collective action. The union movement helped shape modern labor law and workplace expectations, and it proved that industrial progress was not only about machines. It was also about human limits. The safety bicycle changed mobility, especially for women in cities. Earlier bicycles could be precarious, with towering front wheels that made falls terrifying. The safety bicycle lowered the rider, used two similar-sized wheels, and introduced a chain drive that felt steadier and more practical. That stability mattered because it turned cycling into transport rather than a stunt. For city women, it could mean a new kind of independence. You could travel without a carriage, without a chaperone, and without paying a driver to wait. It also pushed clothing debates into the open, since restrictive skirts and corsets did not pair well with pedaling. Some critics called cycling improper, while supporters argued it built health and confidence. The bicycle became a quiet tool of social change because it expanded what a person could do alone. A machine of gears and rubber gave many riders a larger map of their own lives. Sports standardized rules, turning local games into national obsessions. In many towns, games were once played with house rules, arguments settled by loud voices, and teams chosen on the spot. Standard rules changed that. When everyone agreed on the same field size, scoring and fouls, strangers could compete without renegotiating the game each time. Newspapers could report results that readers understood, and leagues could schedule seasons that felt coherent. This created new loyalties. Fans began following teams they had never met, and cities started treating victory as civic pride. Standardization also turned sport into a business, since predictable rules meant tickets, venues, and regular competition. It brought discipline too. Training, coaching, and tactics became more sophisticated because success could be measured over many matches. What began as play became performance, and performance became identity. A shared rulebook helped convert pastime into culture. Baseball professionalized, creating teams, leagues, and celebrity athletes. Baseball moved from informal diamonds to organized schedules, and that shift changed the meaning of a game. Clubs began paying players, crowds grew large enough to support gates, and leagues formed to manage competition and settle disputes. With professionalism came specialization. Pitchers refined techniques, fielders trained for reliability, and managers treated strategy as a craft rather than a hunch. Newspapers helped create stars, describing feats in a way that turned athletes into names people argued about at work and at home. Stadiums became social theaters where class and neighborhood mixed, at least for a few hours. The sport also revealed tensions. Gambling, cheating scandals, and disputes over contracts followed money into the game. Even so, the rise of professional baseball helped invent modern sports fandom, with standings, rivalries, and heroes whose performances felt like shared ND. Public property. Football codes split, forming distinct sports with loyal followings. In the early 19th century, football could mean many rough games, often closer to a moving brawl than a modern sport. As schools and clubs tried to civilize it, rules began to harden into different forms. Some versions emphasized dribbling and kicking. Others allowed carrying the ball, tackling, and contested scrums. Disagreements were not minor because they changed the entire spirit of play. Over time, separate codes became identities of their own, with governing bodies, printed rulebooks, and teams built around those choices. The split mattered culturally. A code could signal region, class, or school tradition, and fans inherited allegiances like family stories. It also mattered internationally, because each version traveled along different networks of empire, migration, and education. What looks like a technical argument about rules was actually a fork in social history, producing sports that feel entirely different to watch and play. Boxing became a spectacle and raised debates about violence and morality. Prize fights could draw crowds that treated fists like theater, yet many observers felt uneasy about what they were cheering. Bare-knuckle bouts were brutal and long, with injuries that were impossible to hide. As gloves and formal rules gained ground, promoters argued that boxing was becoming safer and more respectable, even while knockouts remained the central bass. Thrill. The sport became a stage for masculinity, status, and sometimes ethnic pride, since fighters could carry a community's hopes into the ring. It also became a lightning rod for reformers who condemned gambling, drinking, and the public appetite for blood. Police raids and legal restrictions did not erase the sport, they often made it more tempting. Boxing revealed a lasting tension. Society wanted controlled outlets for aggression, yet it worried about what those outlets might teach. The 19th century turned that argument into a public spectacle, right alongside the fights. Music halls and vaudeville offered mass entertainment long before radio. After long days of labor, people still wanted laughter, surprise, and songs they could hum on the walk home. Music halls and vaudeville delivered variety in fast succession, with comedians, singers, dancers, novelty acts, and melodramatic sketches. The format rewarded performers who could win attention quickly, so timing and personality mattered as much as talent. These venues also shaped taste, because a joke or chorus could spread across a city in a week, repeated by people who never met the performer. For working-class audiences, the hall could feel like a shared living room. For reformers, it could look like temptation, since alcohol and flirtation were often part of the scene. Vaudeville also created pathways for new careers, including for immigrants and women who found stages more open than many professions. Long before broadcasts, a night out could create a common soundtrack for an entire neighborhood. The circus toured widely, blending commerce, wonder, and risky animal acts. A traveling circus arrived like a moving city. Posters went up, wagons rolled in, and suddenly a town had parades, tents, and a promise of sights that ordinary life could not provide. Acrobats and clowns offered skill and humor, while exotic animals were presented as proof that the world was larger than local fields and streets. The show was also a business machine. Tickets, concessions, and relentless travel schedules kept the enterprise alive, and workers lived in a demanding rhythm of packing and rebuilding. The spectacle had darker edges too. Animal treatment was often harsh by modern standards, and accidents could be catastrophic when large creatures and crowded stands mixed. Still, the circus fed a deep hunger for astonishment, especially in places where few people could travel far. It turned distant nature and daring bodies into a single, unforgettable evening. Cheap novels spread popular fiction and built shared characters and clichés. When books were expensive, reading could be a luxury. Cheaper printing and mass distribution changed that, flooding streets and stalls with stories that could be bought impulsively. Sensation novels, adventure tales, and serialized cliffhangers created readers who planned their week around the next installment. Characters became familiar companions, and certain plot turns became so common that they turned into clichés. The impact was social. People who had never met could still discuss the same villain, the same romance, and the same shocking reveal. Critics worried about bad reading, yet supporters argued that fiction built literacy, empathy, and imagination. These novels also shaped expectations about love, crime, and ambition, sometimes more strongly than sermons or speeches. Popular fiction became a kind of shared dream, traded for coins and carried in pockets. It helped create mass culture by giving strangers the same stories to inhabit. Public parks were designed as urban lawns and social mixing grounds. As cities thickened with buildings and smoke, parks were imagined as relief, but could be planned, not accidental. Designers created broad paths, open lawns, and planted trees with an almost medical logic. Fresh air and movement were treated as remedies for urban strain. Parks also carried social ambition. They were meant to be places where different classes might share space under rules of public behavior, at least in theory. A Sunday stroll could become a form of civic education, with benches, fountains, and bandstands encouraging calm recreation instead of crowded taverns. Yet parks were never neutral. Choices about location, policing, and acceptable activities determined who truly felt welcome. Even so, the very idea mattered. A city was not only streets for commerce. It also needed breathing room for bodies and minds. In the 19th century, public parks became monuments to the belief that nature, even curated nature, belonged inside modern life. Policing professionalized in many cities, changing the relationship with authority. Uniformed officers became a daily presence, not an occasional response. Instead of relying on night watchmen or ad hoc groups, many cities built forces with regular pay, defined beats and written procedures. That brought a new promise of order, yet it also brought new tensions. Patrols made streets feel safer for some people, while others experienced surveillance, harassment, or selective enforcement. The work itself demanded new skills. Officers learned to manage crowds, mediate disputes, and respond to accidents in busy streets filled with carts and pedestrians. Early police forces also became entwined with politics, since appointments, favoritism, and public pressure could shape priorities. When riots and strikes erupted, police often stood between workers and employers, which made them symbols of the state's power. Professional policing did not simply reduce crime. It changed how ordinary people negotiated public space and how authority looked in a modern city. Fingerprinting emerged late in the century, reshaping criminal identification methods. For a long time, identifying a repeat offender depended on memory, scars, or a witness who might be wrong. Fingerprinting introduced a different idea. The body carries patterns that can be recorded, filed, and matched with striking reliability. Police and administrators began collecting prints, first experimentally and then more systematically, especially as urban populations made face-to-face familiarity impossible. This created a new kind of record, one that followed a person across borders and years. It also changed the meaning of proof. Instead of relying only on testimony, investigators could point to a physical trace that seemed to speak for itself. The system required training, careful classification, and patience, because thousands of prints were useless without order. Fingerprinting also raised early questions about privacy and state power, because the same tool that catches criminals can also catalogue ordinary citizens. A small whirl on a fingertip became a new kind of identity card. Modern prisons expanded, and punishment shifted toward long-term confinement. Earlier punishment often meant fines, whipping, execution, or short jailing that barely hid a person from the community. The 19th century increasingly treated imprisonment as the central sentence, with long stretches of time meant to correct behavior through discipline. Prisons were built with new architectural ideas, including cell blocks designed for separation, silence, or constant supervision. Reformers argued that structured routine and moral instruction could produce repentance. Critics pointed out that isolation could break minds, and that overcrowding could turn prisons into schools of crime. Daily life inside was shaped by schedules, labor, and strict rules that removed ordinary choices. The prison also became a mirror of class and inequality, since the poor were more likely to be confined and less able to secure humane conditions. Expanding prisons did not simply change crime policy. It changed society's answer to wrongdoing, from spectacle to disappearance behind walls. Telegraphy created new jobs, including skilled operators who worked with code. A telegraph office could feel like the nerve center of a town. Operators listened for patterns of clicks, translated them into words, then sent fresh pulses down the line with swift hands. It was work that demanded concentration and accuracy, since a missed beat could twist meaning. These workers became early information professionals. They handled business orders, railway coordination, government messages, and personal telegrams that carried urgent news. The job created a new kind of literacy too, because fluency in code was valuable, and speed could mean higher status and pay. Telegraphy also offered unusual opportunities. Women worked as operators in some places, and young people could enter a technical field without elite schooling. The telegraph office connected local life to distant events, and the operator stood at the doorway. When a message arrived, it could change a market, a journey, or a family's future in a single minute. Mining booms built towns fast and abandoned them just as quickly. A rumor of gold or silver could turn an empty valley into a crowded street. Prospectors arrived first, then merchants, then saloons, newspapers, and makeshift governments. Buildings went up fast, often from whatever lumber could be hauled in. Fortunes were made and lost with frightening speed, and the town's mood could swing with the latest strike or the latest disappointment. Work underground was dangerous. Collapses, bad air, and explosions were constant threats, and medical care was often limited. When the ore thinned or prices fell, the same forces that built the town could empty it. Businesses closed, families moved on, and streets became quiet again, sometimes leaving only foundations and wind. These boomtowns reveal a sharp truth about the 19th century economy. Opportunity could appear suddenly, yet it could also vanish without apology. A community could be treated like a temporary tool, useful only while the ground paid out. The Suez Canal redrew global trade routes, shortening voyages dramatically. Before the canal, ships traveling between Europe and Asia often faced a long journey around Africa, with storms, delays, and costs that shaped prices worldwide. The Suez Canal offered a straight cut through geography, linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and transforming global travel times. That change was not only about speed, it shifted power. Ports rose and declined based on the new route, and empires treated the canal as a strategic prize that had to be protected. Steamships benefited especially because a canal favors predictable propulsion over fickle winds. The canal also tightened connections between distant markets, making goods, mail, and people move with new regularity. Yet the engineering triumph carried political consequences for Egypt and the region, since debt and foreign influence became entangled with control of the waterway. In the 19th century, a trench dug through sand became a lever that moved world politics and commerce at once. Steamships increased migration, making ocean crossings more routine and crowded. Sailing ships depended on wind and luck, so voyages could stretch unpredictably. Steamships brought steadier schedules, which meant a person could plan a departure and expect an arrival within a narrower window. But reliability lowered barriers for migration because families could sell what they owned, buy tickets, and commit to a date. It also changed the experience of travel. Large numbers of passengers were packed into steerage, where ventilation, sanitation, and food could be grim. Disease could spread fast in confined spaces, and anxiety traveled with it. Even so, steamships expanded the scale of movement across the Atlantic and beyond, carrying workers, refugees, and dreamers toward industrial cities, new farmland. Migration became a mass phenomenon that reshaped languages, cuisines, and neighborhoods. A ship's engine did not only move cargo, it moved human lives in bulk, and it turned the ocean into a corridor rather than a barrier. Ellis Island processing shaped immigrant stories, paperwork, and first impressions. Arrival became a procedure. People stepped off ships after exhausting journeys and entered a system of lines, questions, and inspections that could decide their future in a single day. Officials checked names, destinations, and finances, and doctors looked for signs of contagious disease or conditions that might block entry. For many immigrants, this was their first direct encounter with American authority, and the memory could last a lifetime. Some experienced relief and excitement, while others felt humiliation, fear, or confusion in languages they barely understood. Families worried about separation if one person was detained. The experience also taught a new lesson about modern life. Identity could be reduced to documents, categories, and stamps. Ellis Island became a symbol, not only of welcome but also of gatekeeping, because belonging was treated as something that had to be proven. The 19th century increasingly organized movement through paperwork, and Ellis Island made that truth visible on a crowded shoreline. tenement living forced new housing laws, inspections, and building codes. As workers poured into industrial cities, landlords subdivided buildings to squeeze in more rent-paying families. Rooms were carved into narrow spaces. Light and air were limited, and shared toilets and water sources often served far too many people. In these conditions, fire spread quickly, and illness found easy routes through stairwells and courtyards. Reformers, journalists, and photographers began documenting what many residents already knew: that bad housing was not only uncomfortable, but dangerous. Public pressure pushed governments toward building codes, minimum standards, and inspections that treated housing as a civic issue, not a private bargain. These rules were unevenly enforced, yet they marked a turning point. Cities began accepting responsibility for ventilation, exits, sanitation, and overcrowding limits. Tenement life also shaped culture. Immigrant neighborhoods formed tight communities under stress, with mutual aid, small shops, and shared languages. The tenement was a hardship, and it was also a crucible that forced modern urban policy into existence. Germ fears changed manners, from spitting bans to cleaner milk campaigns. When people began accepting that invisible organisms could spread illness, everyday behavior started to look dangerous. Spitting in public, once common and barely noticed, became a target of new ordinances and sharp social disapproval. Streetcars and sidewalks gained warning signs, and etiquette guides began treating hygiene as civic duty. Another battleground was milk, since cities relied on long supply chains, and contaminated milk could quietly harm infants. Reformers pushed for cleaner dairies, safer transport, and inspection systems that treated food as a public health issue, not just private trade. Even the humble handkerchief took on new meaning, and coughing into open air began to seem reckless rather than rude. These changes could feel intrusive, yet they also carried hope. If disease had pathways, then ordinary people could help block them. Manners became a form of prevention, and social pressure became a tool of medicine. Urban fires drove building reforms, including safer materials and fire brigades. A single spark could turn a dense neighborhood into a roaring corridor of flame. Wooden buildings, open flames for heat and light, and crowded streets that blocked equipment made cities dangerously combustible. When major fires tore through districts, they did more than destroy property. They exposed how unprepared urban life could be for catastrophe, and they forced governments to treat fire as an engineering problem. Building codes began shifting toward brick, stone, and later iron framing in key areas. Water systems, hydrants, and wider streets became part of fire planning, not just convenience. Fire brigades also professionalized, moving away from informal bucket lines toward trained teams with specialized pumps and ladders. Insurance companies joined the pressure, since they had money at stake and demanded risk reduction. After a devastating blaze, citizens often discovered that rebuilding was a chance to redesign. The new city was meant to be harder to burn and quicker to save. Gas explosions and factory accidents exposed the hidden cost of progress. Industrial life promised abundance, yet it also introduced dangers that earlier generations rarely faced. Gas lighting brought brighter streets and rooms, but leaks could fill a space silently, then ignite with a single match. Factories were filled with belts, gears, and unguarded machines that did not pause for a moment of distraction. Boilers could fail with explosive force, and crowded workrooms meant one accident could injure many. These events shocked the public because they felt modern. They were not storms or plagues. They were consequences of human systems built for speed and output. Tragedies pushed arguments about responsibility. Was safety a private matter, a worker's burden, or an employer's obligation? Over time, pressure grew for inspections, safety guards, and rules that treated preventable injury as unacceptable. The 19th century learned that progress is not only what a machine produces, it is also what it puts at risk. Soap and hygiene marketing grew, linking cleanliness with respectability and class. Soap had existed for centuries, yet the 19th century turned it into a symbol with social weight. Manufacturers promoted branded bars as modern necessities, and advertisements began tying cleanliness to morality, health, and status. A clean collar or fresh-smelling laundry was treated as evidence of discipline, even when poverty made cleanliness difficult. This created pressure, especially in crowded cities where dust, smoke, and shared facilities made grime nearly unavoidable. Schools, employers, and reformers often reinforced the message, arguing that hygiene was a pathway to self-improvement and social acceptance. The marketing also pushed new routines into daily life, encouraging regular bathing and frequent laundering as marks of good character. For many families, this was partly empowering, since better hygiene could reduce illness. It was also judgmental, since cleanliness became a way to measure worth. Soap sold more than a product. It sold an identity, and it taught people that respect could be scrubbed into place. The temperance movement gained power, pushing laws that reshaped public drinking. Alcohol had long been woven into social life, from taverns to celebrations, yet industrial cities amplified its harms. Reformers pointed to wages spent at bars, domestic violence, and workplace accidents, and they argued that drinking was not only a personal failing, it was a public crisis. Temperance groups organized lectures, marches, and pledges, and they used vivid stories to persuade families that sobriety meant stability and safety. Women often played central roles, since they experienced the consequences at home and saw temperance as protection. The movement also gained political strength, pressing for licensing limits, closing hours, and in some places outright bans. Critics warned about hypocrisy and black markets, and many workers resented moral policing by elites. Temperance revealed how social reform could become law and how law could divide communities. It turned a glass on the table into an argument about freedom, responsibility, and who gets to set the rules of public life. Women's suffrage campaigns organized marches, petitions, and bold public speeches. Winning the vote required more than belief. It required organization that could endure ridicule, arrests, and slow political calendars. Suffrage campaigners built networks, raised funds, printed newspapers, and trained speakers to address crowds that were not always friendly. Public petitions carried thousands of signatures, which forced legislators to confront the size and seriousness of the demand. Marches made the movement visible, turning city streets into stages where women claimed political space with banners, songs, and disciplined order. Speakers faced heckling, yet they also found allies, including some labor reformers and abolitionists who understood mass mobilization. The campaign was not uniform. Strategies differed by country, region, and class, and disagreements could be intense. Still, the movement changed civic culture even before victory. It taught women to practice politics in public, to argue in print, and to build institutions that could outlast a single leader. Suffrage campaigns made the vote feel inevitable because they made the demand impossible to ignore. Property laws slowly changed, letting more married women control earnings. In many legal systems, marriage once absorbed a woman's economic identity into her husband's, which meant wages, property, and even inheritance could slip out of her control. Reform came in steps, often through hard-fought legislation that varied widely by place. Married Women's Property Acts and related reforms began allowing women to keep earnings, own property, and make contracts in their own name. That shift mattered in daily life. A woman who could hold her wages could leave an abusive situation more easily, invest in a small business, or support children without begging permission. It also changed marriage itself, because economic power influences negotiation inside a household. Critics argued that these laws threatened family order, while supporters insisted that fairness and stability required legal independence. The reforms did not erase inequality, yet they created new possibilities that earlier generations could hardly imagine. Legal language rewired ordinary lives, one clause at a time, and it quietly expanded what women could plan for and what they could protect. The Seneca Falls Convention framed rights demands in unmistakable political terms. In the middle of the 19th century, a gathering in Seneca Falls treated women's rights as a matter of public principle, not private complaint. The convention produced a declaration that echoed the language of political revolution, insisting that women's grievances belonged in the same arena as other claims to Balar: liberty. This was bold because it challenged law, custom, and religion at once, and it did so with clear demands rather than vague appeals. The meeting did not magically create instant change, yet it offered a rallying point that future activists could cite, debate, and build upon. It also revealed how a movement can be born in conversation, then carried outward through print and personal networks. Critics mocked the idea of women voting and speaking publicly, which only showed how radical the challenge was. Seneca Falls matters because it translated frustration into a program, and it treated equality as something that could be organized, argued, and pursued through politics. The corset and crinoline-shaped fashion and constrained bodies by design. Fashion in the 19th century was not only about beauty, it was about architecture for the body. Corsets shaped the torso into a desired silhouette, and crinolines expanded skirts into wide structures that took up space in rooms, doorways, and public streets. Wearing them could be uncomfortable and sometimes hazardous, since tight lacing restricted breathing and large skirts could catch fire near open flames. Yet many women wore them proudly because clothing signaled respectability, status, and belonging. The garments also changed movement. Sitting, climbing stairs, and working with hands all required adjustment, and that shaped what activities felt practical in public. Fashion debates became debates about freedom, health, and morality, with reformers arguing for rational dress and critics warning about impropriety. These clothes reveal a tension at the heart of the century. Bodies were being disciplined by new systems, from factories to schools, and even style joined the project. The corset and crinoline were tools of identity, and they were cages that looked like elegance. Men's beards and moustaches became status signals, and sometimes political style. Facial hair turned into a public statement that people could read at a glance. A full beard might suggest strength, maturity, or intellectual seriousness, while a carefully shaped moustache could signal modern fashion and military pride. Barbershops became social hubs where men traded news, argued politics, and maintained an image that felt as important as a good coat. Portrait photography amplified the trend, since a face could be reproduced and circulated, making style choices more visible than ever. Some leaders and public figures helped set the tone, and imitators followed, hoping to borrow a little authority. Facial hair also interacted with changing ideas about masculinity, hygiene, and respectability, especially as new grooming tools and products appeared. A beard was not only hair. It was a symbol people used to claim identity in a century obsessed with appearances. Mourning customs were formalized, with strict clothing rules and timelines. Grief was shaped into a social script, and that script could be demanding. Families were expected to wear specific colors, fabrics, and jewelry, often for prescribed lengths of time that signaled how close the loss had been. Black crepe, veils, and subdued accessories became visual language, telling strangers that a household was in mourning without a word spoken. Etiquette manuals advised on visits, letters, and the proper tone of conversation, which meant sorrow had rules even when emotions were messy. Photographs were sometimes taken after death, especially for children, creating a final record for families who feared forgetting a face. Mourning also became an industry, with shops selling specialized clothing and objects that could be bought quickly when death arrived suddenly. These customs offered structure, yet they could also weigh heavily, especially on women who were expected to carry visible mourning longer. In the 19th century, grief had a wardrobe and a calendar. Christmas traditions modernized, including cards, trees, and commercial gift-giving. The holiday began shifting from a primarily religious season into a widely shared domestic celebration. Printed Christmas cards made it easier to send warmth across distance, and they helped turn the mail into part of the season's ritual. Decorated trees spread as a practice associated with family life, with candles, ornaments, and homemade charms that made the home feel transformed for a bailli. Few days. Stories and poems also shaped expectations, especially as popular figures like Santa Claus took on more recognizable form through illustration and print. Shops noticed the opportunity, and gift-giving became more commercial, with displays designed to spark desire and urgency. For many families, Christmas became a moment to perform togetherness, even when money was tight. It was a new kind of seasonal identity, built from paper, pine, and purchasing. The 19th century did not invent Christmas, but it helped create the version that feels familiar today. Public museums grew, turning collecting into national education and prestige. Museums became places where a nation could display what it valued and what it claimed to know. Visitors walked through halls of fossils, paintings, and artifacts arranged to tell stories about nature, history, and human achievement. For many people, it was their first encounter with distant civilizations or exotic specimens, all presented as if the world could be organized behind glass. Museums also shaped education, since schools and families used them to teach curiosity, discipline, and taste. Yet collecting carried controversy. Some objects arrived through unequal power, including colonial extraction and looting, and their presence raised questions that still echo today. Museums also competed with each other, seeking rare items that would boost reputation and attract crowds. The building itself became a symbol, with grand architecture meant to inspire awe and civic pride. In the 19th century, knowledge became a public spectacle, and the museum was its stage. World's fairs displayed inventions and competed to define modernity. A World's Fair promised a glimpse of tomorrow, gathered into one sprawling place. Visitors could see machines running, new materials gleaming, and products presented with theatrical confidence. Nations built pavilions that acted like national portraits, showcasing industry, art, and ambition, as if they were weapons in a peaceful rivalry. Crowds came not only to learn, but to marvel, because scale was part of the message. Bigger engines, taller structures, brighter lights. Fairs also shaped consumer taste, since they introduced gadgets and designs that later appeared in shops and homes. Yet the fairs revealed darker truths too. They often displayed colonized peoples and cultures as curiosities, turning inequality into entertainment under the banner of education. For many attendees, the fair was thrilling. It made progress feel tangible, like something you could walk through and touch. It was a contest over what the future should look like and who would be credited for building it. Colonial expansion intensified, and Red Room maps with violent consequences. Empires expanded through treaties, trade deals, military force, and administrative takeover, often claiming a civilizing mission while pursuing resources and strategic advantage. New borders were drawn on paper, yet those lines often ignored languages, histories, and local authority. Colonized regions were reshaped to serve distant markets, with cash crops, mines, and rail lines built to move wealth outward. Resistance was common, and it was frequently met with brutal reprisals that left long scars in communities and memory. Colonial rule also reorganized law and education, sometimes introducing new institutions while suppressing local ones. Missionaries, soldiers, and merchants became intertwined parts of a single system, even when their stated goals differed. The consequences were not confined to the colonies. European politics and economies were transformed by imperial competition and extraction. In the 19th century, the world's map became a battleground of ambition, and the costs were paid in human lives and disrupted futures. The scramble for Africa formalized empire building in brutal administrative lines. In a short span of time, European powers moved from coastal footholds to sweeping claims over vast inland territories. Diplomats negotiated borders with rulers who were not at the table, and maps were filled with straight lines that looked tidy but cut through complex realities. Conquest was often justified with language about order and progress, yet the mechanisms relied on coercion, forced labor, and armed enforcement. New colonial administrations imposed taxes that compelled people into wage labor, and they redirected economies toward exports that benefited imperial centers. Some areas faced rapid violence, including punitive expeditions and mass displacement, while others were controlled through indirect rule that still undermined their local sovereignty. The scramble also intensified rivalry between European states, since territory became a symbol of status and security. The tragedy is how quickly lives were reorganized by decisions made far away. In the 19th century, administrative convenience became a weapon, and borders became scars that outlasted empires. The Opium Wars showed how trade and force could merge as policy. These conflicts revealed a harsh logic of empire, where commercial interests could be enforced by naval power. Britain sought to expand trade with China, and opium became central to that effort despite its destructive social effects. When Chinese authorities tried to suppress the opium trade, the dispute escalated into war, and military technology gave invading forces a decisive advantage. The outcomes included treaties that granted foreign powers new rights, opened ports, and reshaped sovereignty in ways that many Chinese viewed as humiliating. The wars also exposed how moral arguments could be applied selectively, since profit often outweighed concern for public harm. For observers around the world, the message was chilling. A nation could be compelled to accept damaging commerce at gunpoint. The Opium Wars were not only about a drug. They were about the rules of the international system and whose rules counted. The 19th century made plain that free trade could arrive alongside cannons. Indigenous peoples faced displacement, treaties, and assimilation campaigns across continents. As settler societies expanded, indigenous communities were often forced off ancestral lands through pressure that ranged from legal maneuvering to outright violence. Treaties were signed, broken, reinterpreted, and used to justify further seizure, while military campaigns and settler militias made resistance costly. The loss of land meant loss of hunting grounds, sacred sites, and economic independence, which created cascading hardship. Assimilation policies then targeted culture itself, pushing language suppression, religious conversion, and schooling designed to separate children from family and tradition. These efforts were framed as improvement by those in power, yet they often aimed to erase identity and weaken collective resistance. Despite this, indigenous peoples adapted, negotiated, and fought to preserve community, governance, and memory. Their stories are not only of suffering, they are also of survival under relentless pressure. The 19th century shaped modern nations by attempting to unmake the peoples who already lived there, and that legacy remained deeply present. Nationalism surged, helping unify Italy and Germany through war and diplomacy. The century's politics began to revolve around a powerful idea that shared language, culture, and history should form a single nation. In Italy, a patchwork of states and foreign influence faced pressure from revolutionaries, diplomats, and armies that aimed to bind regions into one political pole. Body. In Germany, unification gathered momentum through alliances, conflicts, and careful statecraft, with Prussia playing a central role in shaping the final bulb. Arrangement. These movements used symbols like flags, anthems, and public ceremonies to turn abstract identity into emotional loyalty. Nationalism could inspire hope because it promised self-determination and unity. It could also sharpen hostility because defining us often required defining them. The unifications changed Europe's balance of power, and they set the stage for future rivalries. In the 19th century, nationalism became a tool that could mobilize crowds and armies, and it reshaped the map through shared imagination backed by force. The revolutions of 1848 shook Europe and reshaped political futures. In a single year, uprisings flared across major cities and kingdoms, driven by demands that ranged from constitutional limits on monarchs to broader voting. Rights and national self-rule. Crowds built barricades, printers rushed out manifestos, and governments discovered how quickly streets could become parliaments. Some revolts began with surprising victories, including concessions and new assemblies, before conservative forces regrouped. In many places, the old order returned with arrests and exile, yet the story did not end in failure. The revolutions trained a generation of activists, and they spread political vocabulary about citizens, rights, and representation. They also revealed new alliances and fractures as workers, students, liberals, and nationalists sometimes marched together, then argued over whose freedom pass mattered most. Even defeated movements left behind a changed Europe, where rulers learned fear and reformers learned persistence. The Paris Commune revealed class conflict and frightened governments worldwide. After France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, Paris became a tinderbox of anger, hunger, and mistrust. When the city's radicalized National Guard and working-class supporters seized power in 1871, they tried to build a new kind of government from the progress. Ground up. The Commune experimented with measures that symbolized popular control, and it treated the city as a political laboratory. For supporters, it was a glimpse of justice shaped by ordinary people. For opponents, it was a nightmare of disorder that threatened property and hierarchy everywhere. The conflict ended in brutal violence during the Bloody Week, when government forces retook Paris and thousands died. The shockwaves traveled far beyond France. Conservatives used the Commune as a warning about revolution, and socialists used it as a martyr story about repression. It made modern class politics feel immediate, and it proved that cities could become battlefields of ideology. Japan's Meiji era rapidly industrialized, reshaping power in East Asia. When the Meiji Restoration began, Japan's leaders faced a stark choice: modernize quickly, or risk being dominated by foreign powers. The government pushed sweeping reforms that touched nearly every part of life, from the military to education to the legal system. Railways and factories spread, and new industries were nurtured with state support, creating an economy that could produce modern weapons and modern goods. The old samurai order was dismantled, and a conscript army took its place, shifting status and identity in painful ways. Western science and technology were studied with intense focus, yet the goal was not imitation for its own sake. It was survival and strength. The pace of change was dizzying, and it created winners and losers inside Japan. It also changed the region's balance of power. Within decades, Japan emerged as an imperial force, showing that industrialization could be both defensive and aggressive. China faced internal rebellions, including the Taiping upheaval's vast devastation. In the mid-19th century, the Qing Empire was shaken by a rebellion that became one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The Taiping movement, led by Hong Xiuquan, fused religious visions with political revolt and promised a radically transformed society. Vast territories changed hands. Cities were besieged, and civilians were caught between armies that lived off the land. The war's scale overwhelmed local administration, and it drew in regional militias whose power later reshaped Chinese politics. The destruction was not only in battle. Farmland was ruined, trade collapsed, and disease and famine followed the violence, multiplying suffering. For many communities, the upheaval was a generation-defining trauma, and its aftermath weakened the state's ability to respond to foreign pressure and internal bar. Reform. The Taiping conflict reveals how fragile even huge empires can be when belief, hardship, and governance failures combine. It was a storm that remade lives, landscapes, and the future path of the nation. The Ottoman Empire struggled with reform, debt, and rising nationalist movements. The Ottoman state faced modern pressures on every side. It tried to reform its army, bureaucracy, and legal systems to compete with European powers, and those efforts demanded money, expertise, and political will. Reforms could also provoke backlash because they threatened established privileges and local autonomy. Meanwhile, nationalism grew among diverse populations within the empire, and calls for independence or greater self-rule intensified. Foreign powers often inserted themselves, sometimes as protectors of minorities, sometimes as opportunists seeking influence. Debt became a trap. Borrowing to fund modernization and war could lead to external control over finances, which weakened sovereignty further. The empire was not simply declining in a straight line. It was wrestling with modernity in real time, trying to hold together a multi-ethnic state while rivals watched closely. The 19th century made the Ottoman question a central issue in European diplomacy, and it set the stage for dramatic changes in borders and identities. That would follow. Haiti's earlier revolution echoed, inspiring and alarming slave societies for decades. Haiti's successful slave revolution at the turn of the century was not a sealed event. It became a living warning and a living hope that traveled through ports, plantations, and political debates. Enslaved people elsewhere heard that freedom had been won by force and persistence, and that the most powerful empires could be defeated. Slaveholders heard the same story and responded with fear, tightened controls, and harsher surveillance. Abolitionists used Haiti as proof that slavery could end, while critics used it to predict chaos and justify repression. Diplomats and merchants also reacted. Some nations isolated Haiti, worried about encouraging rebellion, while others traded quietly for profit. The echoes shaped law, policing, and propaganda across the Atlantic world. Haiti's revolution showed that enslaved people were political actors with strategic intelligence, not passive victims. In the 19th century, that lesson haunted the powerful, and it strengthened the imagination of the oppressed. A single island became a symbol that refused to be contained. Scientific racism spread, misusing measurements to justify inequality and empire. As science gained cultural authority, some thinkers tried to wrap prejudice in the language of objectivity. Skulls were measured, bodies were categorized, and complex human differences were forced into crude hierarchies that claimed to rank intelligence and worth. These ideas were often presented with charts and confident terminology, which made them sound credible to audiences that wanted reassurance for existing power structures. Scientific racism was used to rationalize slavery, segregation, and colonial rule, offering a supposed natural order that excused exploitation. It also shaped institutions, from museums to schools, where biased facts were taught as truth. The tragedy is that the methods looked like science, while ignoring the basic demands of fairness, context, and honest evidence. Many scientists and activists challenged these claims, yet the damage spread widely because the conclusions served political goals. The 19th century shows how dangerous it can be when measurement becomes a mask for ideology. Numbers can be used to illuminate or to dominate. Anthropology and archaeology grew, sometimes through looting that museums later celebrated. Curiosity about ancient civilizations and human diversity surged, and new disciplines formed around digging, collecting, and classifying. Expeditions uncovered spectacular objects, and newspapers fed public fascination with tombs, ruins, and lost cities. Museums competed for artifacts that could draw crowds and confer prestige, and collectors treated relics as trophies of knowledge. Yet much of this collecting was entangled with empire. Objects were removed without consent. Sacred sites were disturbed, and local communities were often sidelined in the story of their own heritage. The result was a paradox. Institutions claimed to preserve humanity's past while participating in its extraction. At the same time, careful excavation methods began emerging, and scholars started building timelines that transformed understanding of ancient history. The 19th century helped create archaeology as a science, and it also created enduring ethical debates about ownership, repatriation, and respect. The past became a battlefield, fought with shovels, permits, and power. Poison regulations appeared slowly after scandals proved murder could be chemical. Poison had long been part of medicine and household life, found in rat killers, cleaning agents, and widely sold remedies. That everyday availability created a chilling possibility. A death could be engineered quietly, with symptoms that resembled ordinary illness. High-profile trials and sensational reports made the public aware that murder could happen at the dinner table, not only in alleyways. This fear pushed change on two fronts. Chemists developed better forensic tests for substances like arsenic, and lawmakers began restricting sales, labeling containers, and tracking purchases. The reforms were uneven and often reactive, since regulation tended to follow outrage rather than prevent it. Apothecaries and pharmacists gained greater professional responsibility, and courts grew more interested in scientific testimony. Poison scandals also changed popular storytelling, because the idea of hidden danger inside a home captivated readers. The 19th century introduced a modern anxiety. Risk could be invisible, and the ordinary could be weaponized. Regulation became a way to make trust possible again. The first modern detective stories reflected new anxieties about cities and crime. As cities grew denser, strangers lived side by side, and crime began to feel both closer and harder to explain. Detective fiction responded by offering a comforting fantasy. A sharp mind could sort chaos into order. Early detectives used observation, deduction, and careful attention to small clues, which mirrored the period's fascination with science, policing, and rational systems. These stories also captured urban fears about anonymity, hidden motives, and the idea that danger could wear respectable clothing. Readers were invited to become investigators, scanning details and testing theories, which made the act of reading feel interactive. The detective also became a new kind of hero. Not a warrior, but a thinker who could defeat violence with reason. These tales shaped expectations about real investigations, even when reality was messier. In the 19th century, the detective story was entertainment, yet it was also a cultural toolkit for living in modern crowds. It taught people to look closely, suspect patterns, and believe that truth could be reconstructed. Banks expanded credit, and financial panics showed how connected economies had become. A shopkeeper could borrow to expand, a farmer could borrow against a future harvest, and a railroad could borrow to lay track toward towns that did not exist yet. Credit made growth faster, and it also made failure contagious. When confidence cracked, people rushed to pull savings, and banks that looked solid could collapse simply because too many demanded cash at once. Panic traveled along the same routes as commerce. A rumor in one city could tighten lending in another, and suddenly businesses could not make payroll even if customers still wanted goods. Newspapers carried the fear, and crowds gathered outside bank doors, waiting to learn whether a lifetime of savings was safe. These crises taught a harsh lesson. Modern prosperity was built on trust, and trust could vanish in an afternoon. The 19th century began revealing that an economy is a web, not a row of separate shops. The gold standard debates revealed how money policy could shape daily life. To many people, money seemed like simple metal and paper, yet the rules behind it could decide who prospered and who struggled. Tying currency tightly to gold promised stability and international confidence, which appealed to bankers and merchants who feared inflation. Critics argued that a strict gold link could choke the money supply, making it harder for farmers and small borrowers to repay debts when prices fell. The debate was not abstract. It lived in mortgage payments, wages, and the price of grain at market. Political campaigns turned monetary policy into a moral drama, with speeches that framed gold as honesty or framed flexibility as fairness. People who never entered a bank still felt the consequences in tight credit and scarce cash. The 19th century made money feel political in a new way. A coin was not only a thing you held. It was a decision made by laws, interests, and power. Insurance markets grew, pricing risk for homes, ships, and factories. As life became more commercial, uncertainty became something that could be bought and sold. Insurance firms offered protection against fire, shipwreck, and loss, turning disasters into financial calculations. This changed behavior. A factory owner who paid for coverage also faced inspections and conditions because insurers wanted fewer claims. Cities began seeing safer building practices not only as moral choices, but as financial incentives. Insurance also altered grief and recovery. After a fire, a payout could mean rebuilding instead of ruin, at least for those who could afford premiums. Yet the system carried inequality. Poorer families often had less access, and some groups faced discrimination in coverage. Insurance companies gathered data, built actuarial tables, and learned to treat chance like a manageable product. That mindset shaped modern life. The 19th century helped invent the idea that the future can be budgeted, even when it cannot be predicted. Telegraph-based markets made prices travel faster than physical goods. Before fast communication, a merchant might learn a new price only after a ship arrived or a traveler brought news. Telegraph lines changed that rhythm. Commodity prices, stock quotes, and exchange rates could be transmitted in minutes, which meant information could outrun cargo. A trader could buy based on a signal from another city, long before a shipment of wheat or cotton reached its destination. This speed rewarded those who had access, and it punished those who did not, widening gaps between insiders and slower participants. It also intensified speculation. When numbers update quickly, people start treating markets like living creatures that can be ridden or feared. Telegraphy helped turn finance into a real-time arena, with sudden swings that felt mysterious to outsiders. The 19th century began teaching a modern truth. In markets, the most valuable thing is often not the product. It is knowing first. Scientists began measuring weather systematically, laying foundations for forecasting. For centuries, people read the sky with experience and folklore, then hoped they were right. the 19th century started turning weather into records. Thermometers, barometers, and standardized observations created logs that could be compared across regions. Telegraph networks helped too, because a storm seen on one coast could be reported inland before it arrived. This made a new idea plausible. Weather might be predicted, not perfectly, yet better than guessing. Governments and institutions began supporting meteorological services, since ships, farmers, and railways had money and lives at stake. The work required discipline. Observers had to measure at set times, use consistent tools, and report accurately. Over time, patterns emerged that could be mapped, studied, and used to warn. Forecasting did not remove danger, yet it changed how people faced it. The 19th century began giving society an early warning system, built from patience, instruments, and shared data. The first modern census methods expanded, turning populations into countable data. Counting people sounds simple until you try to count millions across cities, farms, and remote districts. 19th century states improved census systems to track population growth, migration, and work patterns with greater detail. Enumerators went door to door, recording names, ages, occupations, and sometimes birthplace, literacy, or housing conditions. The results shaped power. Representation, taxation, and policy could depend on numbers gathered in a few hectic weeks. The census also changed how governments imagined their citizens. A nation became a set of statistics that could be compared over time, mapped by region, and used to justify reforms or crackdowns. For individuals, being counted could feel like recognition, or it could feel like intrusion. Mistakes and omissions were common, yet the ambition was new. The 19th century helped invent governance by spreadsheet and chart, long before computers existed. People became data, and data became authority. Public health boards formed, linking government authority to disease control. When epidemics struck, communities learned that individual caution was not enough. Public health boards began appearing to coordinate responses that required collective action. They inspected neighborhoods, regulated waste removal, managed quarantine rules, and pushed sanitation measures that were unpopular until disaster made them urgent. These boards also gathered information, tracking outbreaks and deaths to understand patterns rather than relying on rumor. Their power raised questions that still feel familiar. How much authority should the state have over movement, business, and personal behavior during a health crisis? Who gets protected first, and who gets blamed? Public health officials often faced resistance from people who feared lost income or lost freedom. Yet the alternative could be chaos, with disease spreading through crowded streets and workplaces. The 19th century began building the idea of public health as a civic service, not just private medicine. It was a new contract. The state would intervene, and the public would argue about the price. The notion of childhood softened as reformers pushed play, schooling, and protection. Industrial life had treated many children as small adults who could work, earn, and endure long hours. Reformers challenged that view by arguing that development mattered and that young bodies and minds needed time for learning and rest. Schools expanded, children's literature flourished, and new ideas about parenting emphasized guidance rather than sheer discipline. Photographs and family portraits helped strengthen the sense that childhood was a distinct stage worth preserving, since children were seen as individuals with futures, not only as helpers. Laws targeting child labor and compulsory education did not transform life overnight, yet they shifted cultural expectation. Employers and parents increasingly faced scrutiny when children were harmed or denied schooling. This change also shaped identity. If childhood is meant for growth, then society has responsibility for conditions that allow it. The 19th century began moving childhood from the workshop into the classroom and from necessity into protection. Vegetarian and health movements gained followers, mixing science, religion, and morality. As cities grew and industrial food systems expanded, many people began wondering what modern life was doing to the body. Health reformers promoted fresh air, exercise, bathing, and simple diets, often linking physical habits to moral strength. Vegetarianism gained visibility through advocates who argued that meatless eating could reduce disease, calm violent impulses, or align life with our spiritual principles. Some followers were motivated by compassion for animals, others by digestive troubles, and others by hopes of self-control in a fast-changing world. Health manuals and lectures offered rules for living that felt like practical salvation, especially for those anxious about crowded streets and mysterious illnesses. These movements were not uniform, and some claims were misguided, yet they show a new hunger for personal agency. The 19th century did not only build machines, it also built modern self-help culture, where diet became identity and health became a project. By century's end, daily life depended on networks, not just neighbors. A person could eat food shipped from far away, read news from another continent, and send a message across a city in moments, all without leaving home. That reliance on systems brought comfort and opportunity, and it also created fragility. A rail strike could disrupt supplies. A bank panic could freeze wages. A telegraph failure could delay decisions that businesses had learned to make quickly. Even family life was touched, since letters, schedules, and market prices shaped choices that once depended mainly on local seasons and local customs. Networks also changed identity. People began belonging to nations through newspapers, to industries through unions, and to consumer culture through brands. The 19th century ended with a world that felt both larger and more tightly bound, like a web stretched across oceans. Modern life was no longer only about who lived nearby. It was about which systems you were plugged into and whether they held. As we come to the end of our journey through life in the 19th century, you can almost feel the world speeding up around you. Steam engines pushing and pulling, railways stitching cities together, wires carrying voices and urgent news, and streets glowing under new kinds of light. We wandered through crowded tenements and wide public parks, through bustling department stores and noisy factories, and into hospitals where new ideas about germs, anesthesia, and antiseptics began saving lives that would once have slipped away. We listened for the click of telegraph code, the scratch of a typewriter, and the first captured sounds of a phonograph that could remember a song. We also touched the heavier truths: empires redrawing maps, communities displaced, wars reported in sharp detail, and movements rising to demand rights, safer work, and a fairer share of time itself. All of it reminds us that history is not a distant museum. It is the slow turning of countless human days, each one shaping the next. Now, let your thoughts loosen their grip on the details. Let the images settle like dust after a long parade. Allow your breathing to find an easy rhythm, and let your shoulders grow warm and heavy against the bed or the pillow. If you are still awake, and you would like another calm journey, there will be another video waiting on your screen. And if you enjoyed this one, you might like, subscribe, or share a comment so others can find their way here too. For now, you have done enough. The century can rest, and so can you. Sleep well, and good night.